Yay! Welcome, 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 welcome. Tuesdays are murder. Indeed, they are because you're not even at the hump day in the week yet, right? But today we specifically get to talk to a man who I am so honored to call a friend and have gotten to work with him, which we'll talk about later. But you have seen his work for sure. I'm certain of it. Whether it was back in 1997 with the ABC, of course, Disney's Cinderella that was co-produced by Whitney Houston and starred Brandy and Whitney Houston and a bunch of other people that we'll talk about in a minute, as well as a two-part miniseries, Life with Judy Garland, Me and My Shadows, which was unbelievable back in 2001. And then, of course, more recently, for which he won a small little award called the Tony Award, Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder. Please welcome my friend, Robert L. Freedman. Woo!
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Robert, I'm so glad to have you here. You are just amazing, and I cannot wait to talk to you about so many things. But I just kind of want to start real quick with saying one of my favorite moments was so we met because I was directing your wife in Ragtime, and a little tiny show, and she was brilliant in it. She was playing our Emma Goldman, for anyone who's in the room who doesn't know. And she she told me backstage I was going to New York on a theater trip because I have to go every year, to see what's coming down the pipeline and all the new stuff. And she's so unassuming and so like, well, my husband just wrote a show and it's opening on Broadway and blah blah blah. But for some reason, she told me, and I thought it was a play. I don't know why. And when I go, I only am able to see musicals. Sadly, now that's changed a bit. But initially, I was only allowed to see musicals when I went, in order for my tickets to get paid for. And so I was like, oh, that's so cool. And we talked about it. And then I didn't, because I had already bought all my theater tickets, and I didn't get to go see this show. And then lo and behold, that next Tony season, it went, I was like, it's a musical? And it wins. And there you are up on stage collecting your Tony Award. Unbelievable. So then I had the great honor of getting to see the show later that fall after it had won the Tony, still with the original company, except I think, and actually I saw your Phoebe's last performance, I think, or second to the last performance. And I got to not only see it, but then I got to talk with you about the show you wrote and won the Tony for right after the show on stage. That was the most surreal experience, getting to do that. So before we get to Gentleman's Guide, though, let's talk about some other fun things. So you had an incredible education. You went to two small schools, UCLA and NYU, Tisch School of the Arts. I wanted to ask you, and you have an MFA, of course, for dramatic writing and musical theater writing. Because we've talked a lot about education on a lot of these panels, and talking about, for actors, for dancers, the importance of it. I always say getting an education is one of the best things you can ever do, obviously, for your life. But there are some people that end up getting these incredible careers that don't graduate from college or what have you. But your specific line of work, like, how important was your education, and did a lot of relationships and things like come from that? Like, yeah, tell us a little bit about that before we dive into other things.
Well, my friend Kathy is here. I want to say hi. She and I went to UCLA together, although she wasn't in the theater department. But I got a great liberal arts education at UCLA, so I value that tremendously. And I started as an English major, and I switched to the theater department. And there was one professor in particular, a guy named Gary Gardner, who was so enthusiastic. Everybody had to take beginning playwriting. It didn't matter if you were interested in writing or would ever write again. And that's where I wrote my first play in college. I'd done some writing before that, but I got a lot of encouragement from that. And also there was a great program at the time where it was called a one-act program. So every fall and every quarter, so there were 3 quarters, so every fall, winter, and spring, they had a one-act play festival. And they were basically the one-act plays that came out of this beginning screenwriting class that everybody had to take. And every year that I was at UCLA, I had a play produced at that. I'm getting my lighting switch by my lighting designer. Is that better? Thank you. And that was a great education. What they did at UCLA at the time was everybody had to build sets, paint sets, hang lights, make scenery, do lighting, do sound, be stage manager. Everybody had to do every aspect of theater. And that alone by itself was a great education. And also for a writer, seeing your work on stage, or for an actor getting a chance to perform, they were in the little theater, not on the main stage, and it was just a great experience. And then going to NYU, I don't know that everybody will ever have this exact experience again, but our class was the first ever in the musical theater program.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know you were part of the first class of Tisch.
That's
wow.
Whitney Houston, who wrote Wicked, and
yeah.
George Wolfe, who's George Wolfe, and, who's a great director as well as a great writer. And a lot of other really talented people were in that program. And our teachers were the greats of musical theater. We had Leonard Bernstein, we had Betty Comfrey-Green, we had Arthur Lawrence and Julie Stein, and we had Peter Stone, and then we had, I'm leaving people out, I'm sure. And people came to speak to our class, like Stephen Schwartz and Michael Bennett, and choreographers came, and it was an incredible time.
Unbelievable, yeah. It's literally all the great, wow.
Yeah, you just had to pinch yourself. And so we're always doing assignments, and then eventually you pick somebody to collaborate with and write, I guess, what you'd call a thesis. So my first show came out of that program. And within the first year out of that program, I had a stage reading of it at Playwrights Horizons, which was then and still is one of the
that's a premier place to get your work done. Yeah. So you would say then, obviously, for your particular part in this business, that the education obviously was invaluable and something that
you mentioned something that's really important too, I think, and that is my best friends, or let's say most of my best friends to this day, are either people I went to UCLA with or people I went to NYU with. And other people I met along the way because of in those places. And then there are people that I've known even longer. But for a lot of people, the people that you meet in programs like these are people that when you all end up in New York, say, you might end up collaborating with as a way to do theater, to make theater, I know that's true of kids from Northwestern and Michigan and NYU, Carnegie Mellon, they have a network when they get to New York with people. So I think it's valuable for that too.
Like you said, going even more specifically, if you're doing your undergrad, wherever you're doing it, but then making sure you get into a program like a Tisch or a Carnegie Mellon or somewhere that is, if you're going to spend the money on an education, you want to go somewhere that's, ideally, or like a, UCLA that is going to provide those kinds of opportunities. Cause you were working with the greats, and then so many people in your class are now this generation's greats, you know what I mean? And none of you were those people yet, you know what I mean? So you, like you said, you had relationships with Bernstein and so on and so on, but then now you have these relationships with Winnie and all these other people that you have you were in class with because you were in class and all learning together. So that's a valuable lesson. I love that.
The other thing I would say, let me just say thing about it is that the one thing I worry about is people who, instead of going to undergrad, go straight into a conservatory. And there's some great ones, and I don't mean to say anything negative about them. But whether you do it because you're in college or because you read voraciously, you need to, I think everybody needs to familiarize yourselves with the classics, the classics of theater, the classics of literature, art, everything, film, everything that will become a reference point when you start collaborating with other people. Even just generationally, I find it interesting at my advanced age that when I work with younger people, there's some people who have no frame of reference for many things that my generation has a frame of reference for. And yet there are some kids, I'll call them kids, who do, because they've either gotten an education or they made it a point to read certain texts and familiarize themselves with stuff. And so there's just a common reference, that includes current pop culture. I shouldn't say
100%. I think that it's a brilliant point, because I think that we talk about the word diversity is used a lot these days, right? And in so many different ways. And it doesn't just mean race, size, religion, sexual orientation. Diversify your knowledge of this art form, you know what I mean? And really not just going like, I love Dear Evan Hansen, I love Hamilton, I love, all the things that are right now. But what about why and how those things wouldn't be what they are without what came before it? Every single generation had a musical that unlocked the door. Rent was that in the 90s. And then before that, we had a chorus line. And, there were so many shows that unlocked, the door for the next style of things to come. So I think that's a beautiful point you make. And it is sad to know that I'll talk to people, even I'm directing, who have no idea certain names that should be like common knowledge or works that should be common knowledge. And it makes me go like, oh God, what are you being taught or not taught, So yeah, it's a great point.
One thing I would say to younger people is be curious.
Yeah.
If you're sitting in a room of people and you're working on something and somebody mentions Fred Astaire and you've never heard of Fred Astaire, find out everything you can about Fred Astaire, or, name anybody, know.
Yeah.
And what I worry sometimes is people aren't curious enough even to find out about the people they're hearing about.
Yep.
I mean, one thing that I always joke about too is that, like, I like to make a t-shirt sometime. It says, everything I know about life, I learned from musical comedy. But the truth is, because I've been so familiar with so many shows that have been written in the 20th and 21st century, that I have learned a lot about life and about things I wouldn't know about.
Yep.
Because I didn't live in River City, Iowa, or, Siam or something.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So there's a lot to be learned just by being familiar with other works of art.
Amazing. I saw someone sign on that I want to save for later. I'm so excited that she's here. But I want to talk to you then now real quick before we dive into like some specific projects and ultimately get to Gentleman's Guide. So what is your process, your general process when you go to write, maybe specifically a musical, but I mean, honestly, anything? What inspires you? What gets you going? Yeah. What's your process?
Well, obviously it's the story and the main characters and their journey that gets me interested, or the milieu, or all of those things.
You have like specifically, like, I guess a sidebar to this, like, because I know you've had works that you've done that are based on ideas from your head, and then there are works that you've done where you've adapted things or what have you, like from Gentleman's Guide or Cinderella or
right.
Life with Duty. So what is, when you are looking for something, when you're like, that's the story I want to adapt or tell, and or how do you come up with an original idea that you feel like really has legs?
It's just something that speaks to you, you know, I can't define it as one thing.
Sure.
Something that you identify with usually. And there have been jobs that I've been offered that I've taken, particularly in television, where I might not have chosen to write about that, but I get offered the project and I think, okay, that's interesting. Let me go and find out everything there is to know about that thing. You know, what, either a social issue or political issue or things like that. I've written about so many different things, and I've written about true crime a lot, true crime in that genre.
Right.
In television, which is really no connection to the fact that I wrote a musical about murder. That's just a complete coincidence. But, I can tell you how I got involved with Cinderella.
I would love to, because that's when we start talking about that, it's one of my first questions about that project. Let's hold on that just for one second, because I want to when we dive into Cinderella, I want to like dive into it. So real quick, do you have a tip for anybody getting through writer's block? I mean, I know that when I'm even just writing like a description to something, I don't have to write a show or anything. I get blocked. Like, how do you get through that? That's got to be like tough.
Well, I think for most writers, writer's block is about fear. You have to overcome your fear that it won't be good. There won't be good enough, that you're not good enough, that you've heard of imposter syndrome. No matter how much success you've had, it doesn't matter. Every time you start a new project, you're starting all over from scratch, you know, and it's extremely intimidating. So the longer you put off writing, the less chance there is that you'll be found out for the fraud that you are. So fear is a big thing. And like I said, everybody has it. Not everybody, but people who are successful have it just as much as people who haven't achieved success so far. And so there are a few little tricks I've learned along the way. One is just sit down in front of your computer and write something, anything. Just get started. Stay off the internet. These are all those things. Then there's a couple things, like there's a reason why it's called a first draft. It doesn't have to be good. Tell yourself that. It doesn't have to be good, and it's true. You don't even have to show it to anybody. It's your first draft. All it has to be is be. It just has to exist. And you can just throw anything down on paper, but that will get you started and hopefully get you flowing. And just remember, it's the first draft. I
think that's such powerful advice for anybody in any. That's what I love about these panels that we're doing, is noticing the commonalities and things that are just empowering to artists, because fear, I think, is what stands in every single person's way in anything in life, you know.
Well, I know actors can identify with that too.
Exactly.
I mean, to put yourself out there as an actor, what could be more?
Yeah, or as a choreographer, a director, like literally everything is we all need to be okay to fail and know that we're gonna learn something powerful and only be a better artist, you know, when we do. So I think that's amazing. A lot of these other questions I think can be.
There's another trick I have, which is.
Oh, please. Oh yes, please. Yeah. Give it.
Who's a writer wants a trick. You don't have to start with the very first scene or very first chapter of something. Start with something that's just so easy and obvious, that presents no challenge, that doesn't have to be brilliant. A little scene, it could be in the middle, at the end, at the beginning, anywhere. And just start with the easy thing. And then when you start with the easy thing, the other things start to flow.
I never even would have thought of, like, you think, you know, it goes back to The Sound of Music. Let's start at the very beginning. And that's not always the way to do it. I would never have thought about that when.
Act 1, scene 1 is terrifying.
Yeah. Of course it is. Of course it is. So much, it's everything, you know what I mean? It sets it all up. So that's brilliant. I love that.
I know that all writers feel that way.
Oh my God.
There may be, 1% of writers who just never have any of these issues. I don't care about them, and I hate them.
Right. That's my favorite. So, okay, I have other questions, but I want to dive into this first. Cinderella was your first big thing, right?
Yeah, they have the largest viewing audience. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
I mean
Yeah.
I think
We
it's
don't
still.
get a viewing audience of 60 million people
I
anymore.
was just gonna say it's 60 million people. It you had it. I think still is one of the most expensive television movies ever created. It was budget of 12
12
million
million.
dollars.
You know,
Um,
I'm not even sure, but I'll tell you a little story. We were in the middle of shooting, and those of you who've seen it, Whoopi Goldberg played the Queen, and there really wasn't a dedicated set for the Queen's quarters, if you will, bedroom or boudoir or private chamber or anything like that. And she was doing a kind of intimate scene with her husband and her son, and it was just done against. It was just somewhere in the palace, and she thought it ought to have a dedicated space, So she mentioned it, and they said it costs too much money. We can't afford it. And she said, "I'll write the check," and she did.
wow,
So
she's awesome. I have to say, like,
she's awesome. Yeah.
she's awesome, and I can't wait to talk. So, for anyone who lived under a rock or maybe wasn't around in 1997, it was a big for me. I was in high school. We were doing Cinderella in 1998. We were just like obsessing. It was like Ever After came out, and this came out. It was like a big time for Cinderella, oddly enough, in like the late 90s. So first of all, I want to know. I know Whitney Houston was a co-producer on it. She initially brought this, I think, to CBS. It was like when shortly after Gypsy was a really big deal, and it had done well. And she initially wanted to star as the title role, and then time had gone by. It lost interest, and before it landed in ABC's lap, she deemed herself a little too old at that point to play the part, and had then brought Brandy on, who then, of course, would become the first Black woman to play the role, I think probably ever, but certainly in a Broadway and film, TV, all of that, which kills me that it took literally, I think, 2 decades or so before a Black actress would then play that part on Broadway as a replacement years later. But tell me, how did this job happen for you? Like, how did you get, I mean, you had Whitney Houston, Brandy, Jason Alexander, Whoopi Goldberg, Bernadette Peters, Vianne Cox, Natalie Desselle, Victor Garber, who you would later work with again, and Paulo Montalban. Like, how on earth did this happen? What an incredible thing.
Well, of course, I give credit to the producers and the network and for deciding to do it. And I feel lucky to have been part of it. I'll tell you how I got the job. I don't even do this anymore, but at the time I had written some TV movies and I was reading the trades, and I had gotten this MFA in musical theater writing, at NYU, but I wasn't doing anything musical because I was able to make a living just with dramatic writing. So I see that they're going to do this musical of Cinderella. Now, I have a childhood memory of seeing Cinderella in 1965 with Leslie Ann Warren.
Of course, yeah.
And they repeated it every year, maybe
Yeah.
more than once. And I watched it every year. I just was in love with her. I don't know. And I just, I adored her and I adored it. When I looked at it again years later, when I was writing this, I was shocked at sort of how pedestrian it was.
Yes.
But at the time, it was really quite something. So I felt connected to the story, but also the women in my life had often expressed, I don't know, discomfort or consternation with the Cinderella story, which is that, just wait around for a knight in shining armor to take you away and all your problems will be solved.
Yeah.
And so it was important to me that not be the message of the story.
Right.
You have some agency yourself. But anyway, so what I did is I read in Variety or something that that they were going to do this movie, and I thought, oh my God, I've got to meet these people, these producers, Craig Zaiden and Neil Marin. I got to meet them because I'm perfect for this. And I got myself a meeting with them, and I think before I left the room, they already wanted to hire me. I gave my spiel about what I thought a modern day Cinderella story should be about. And I knew that it was Whitney Houston from the beginning.
Right.
So I knew that it was going to, it was
going to be different.
It was not going to be an all African-American Cinderella. It was going to be colorblind.
Right.
Multicultural, however you want to put it. And that was really exciting. And I remember being on the set the first time that Brandy appeared at the top of the staircase in her
blue dress. Yeah, right.
And I just wept, just seeing her. Amazing. And I wasn't the only one, because we all knew what it would mean to little kids out there to see a Black girl playing Cinderella. We all knew that that was a good thing that we were doing, and it was very moving. So it was thrilling to be a part of.
I have so many questions about this, and there's actually one, and you've already touched on it, and I'd love for you to discuss more. I have so many questions. You kind of move as a person with a multi or diverse family, with a multiracial family. It's you look at that kind of stuff so much more than you would, like, you look at it if you're not that, and you still look at, wow, that's an impactful thing. But it was so ahead of its time. I think that there were some people that, talking about what you did with the character of Cinderella and trying to empower her more than she is written and traditionally done. Those early, and I'm going to call them Disney princesses, because even in the source material, a lot of them, Snow White, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, before the new generation of princesses were knight in shining armor, and they were kind of helpless, and you really helped give her some chutzpah, if you will. But sorry, to get back onto the original question, what was that something that was set out from the very beginning? And I'm assuming was that Whitney Houston that was like, we're going to have a completely colorblind cast and not be like, the prince's family is going to be Asian and Cinderella's family is going to be Black. It was going to be like, it didn't matter.
The king was Black, the king was Jewish, the prince was Filipino. And that was always, we didn't know, there were many lists of possible people who could play different parts. So at any given moment, a white woman might have played the queen and a Black guy might have played the king, or so. It was just fluid, because when you're casting something, they reached for the moon and they got a lot of people they reached for. But there were some people, like Julie Andrews had been the first Cinderella in Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella in 1957. And they tried to get her to play the queen, things like that.
Sure.
I can't imagine, we ended up with a perfect cast as far as I was concerned.
Truly. And was it, were you given, when you were writing that, because I truly think, and I believe, if I'm not wrong, that version is available to license, because I think it then later went on a tour.
It went on a tour. I don't know how.
With actually Paolo, right? He did it with like
Paolo and Eartha Kitt as the fairy godmother.
Right. Yeah. So that I know is available to license. But because to me, did you just get access to the R&H catalog and you got to figure out what you wanted to put where? Because they were the stepmothers, falling in love, all of that is just brilliant. It's so good.
Thank you. Yeah. I got some resistance from Rodgers and Hammerstein over Falling in Love with Love, because it was written with Lauren's heart, not with Hammerstein, and they would have preferred finding a song that was written by
Hammerstein. Yeah,
but, and they also sort of fought me on like the meaning of the song, like it wasn't about a woman who was bitter at having fallen in love and been burned. You know, and I said, but it is, and it's a great explanation. Stepmother never had a song, and so there was never a way of knowing what made her.
Yeah.
Why was she training her daughters to marry for money and not for love?
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah. So it just seemed perfect to me. And they let it go, and that was great. And then the other one was near the beginning, The Sweetest Sounds, which was from a show that Rodgers wrote music and lyrics for, called No Strings. And that just seemed to work really well too. So just got lucky. And then
it was so good. I mean, especially like the stepmother in the musical is so poorly, and she's a delicious, like one of the best, I'm gonna say again, like Disney villains, like the Lady Tremaine, and then later when Ever After came out, Angelica Houston, and there's been these really great moments eventually that have evolved in that character, and I am so thankful that as one of my favorite villains, because it's just so hateful to be that cruel to a child, right? And the monologue that you wrote for her on the staircase with Cinderella, the humanity that Bernadette brought to it, the song choices that you did, it was just brilliant. It was so good, and yeah, very very well crafted. So yeah, bravo.
It was like being a kid in a candy store, really.
Were you then on set all the time? Were things constantly changing and evolving and all that?
Yeah. I don't know about constantly, but there were often little things. Most of the time, you're on such a tight schedule. We had a wonderful director, Rob Iskov, and choreographer, Rob Marshall.
I was just gonna say, you worked with a little guy who was at the beginnings of his career, Rob Marshall.
Sergey Trujillo, who's now a Tony-winning choreographer, was one of the dancers. It was a great group, but anytime I would butt in to say, they're not saying that line right, it's written da-da-da, and, or something like that, I would be stopping shooting. So I had to, I was looking at my own monitor, I had my headset, and I was sort of hidden away, and I had to just choose my battles. And one time, I adored Whoopi Goldberg. I think I made that clear in every way, and she was a joy in every way. But one time, there was a lull, and they had to hold for something, and so I wouldn't have been interrupting anything. And I noticed that, couldn't help but notice that Whoopi was sort of riffing.
Yes.
And I wasn't sure if by not saying the words, she might have been not communicating the meaning of the scene. And I went up to the script supervisor, not to Whoopi. I could have gone to the director or the script supervisor, just said, I just want to make sure are you following that she's not actually saying it? And Whoopi overheard me, and she said, I'm going to say it the way I'm going to say it. She said it nicely. Very nicely. And, she was great.
Yeah, but that definitely sounds like a Whoopi response for sure. That's amazing.
I wasn't going to argue with her.
Nope. I actually happened to be there. I was on the backlot tour as a guest at Universal the day they were filming The Prince is Having a Ball. I was there.
Oh, yeah.
They were filming that. It was really cool. I saw that all set up.
Also had to add lyrics to that because of what Rob Marshall and David Creighton, the dance arranger, had decided to do, and they needed more song. And so
one of the most all the new arrangements were incredible, and that new ball sequence was just unbelievable. Anyway, we could gush all day about Cinderella and so many more things to talk about. But do you have any did you work with Whitney? Like, do you have any stories about anything that sticks out on that set? If you're like, this was like a moment. I see Jean covering her face. Give me something about, before we move on to the next project. Now she's covering her mouth. I love it.
Whitney was a challenge.
I can imagine.
She was absolutely gorgeous to look at. And she had the most beautiful diamond ring that I've ever seen. And I'm not like crazy for diamonds per se, but it was so spectacular, you couldn't help but notice it. And I noticed it a lot because she wanted me like next to her, but a little step behind, holding the script during rehearsals.
Oh, okay.
And I was like constantly like at her ring finger,
Right.
And that was kind of weird. She didn't really acknowledge my presence much, but she was, and she only had 4 days to do all of her scenes because of her busy schedule. And it didn't matter really that she was the one of the producers, it just is what she had. And so everything had to be done in just those 4 days. And it was challenging. Wow. And there are things that someday I'll write a book and I'll tell you some other things, but ultimately she was in a time of her life that
it was a rough time. Yeah,
it was a rough time.
Yeah.
And, there were, I had to just let go about the dialogue because either she wasn't going to say it the way it was written or she slurred it.
Yeah.
Because she wasn't completely,
All
and
there.
so
Yeah.
I give great credit to the director and the editor who patched together a performance, and she looked great in it. And
Oh, she really did. No, she did. You would never know.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would never know. But yeah, the poor thing, obviously, lived a very tumultuous life. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was cool that you got to have, even from the ring finger, cool that you got to work with many legends in that one fell swoop. So not a bad way to start out your career, I would say. You had many, many nominations and wins for various different award ceremonies, including obviously nominations in the Emmys and the Golden Globes. And now, were you involved before we depart from that, were you involved with the tour at all, or they just licensed it from you? And Gene's covering her mouth again.
Bit of a sore subject, but they just adapted my script. And at first I was supposed to be adapting it. And then one day they stopped returning my lawyer's phone calls, and that was it.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the business.
That's going to be in the book. The tea that will be spilt with that book. Wow. Okay, I got to get to my next.
Go ahead.
No, I just got to get to because this thing was the Judy Garland, Life with Judy, and that Me and My Shadow thing. I'm not joking. My sister and I obsessed over this because largely, the whole thing was incredible. And my sister, was saying, I think largely because of the fact that it was, from Lorna's point of view, who was kind of the other kid, you know what I mean? But oh my gosh, Judy Davis's performance is unreal, like unbelievable. So what was that like? How did that come about? Because you also produced it, correct? I believe.
Yeah. The Judy Davis thing came from the producers having worked with her when she played a big part in a movie about Greta Kammermeyer, the first, I guess she was a Navy officer who came out, and I guess she was the first, and they did her story. It starred Glenn Close. And they worked with Judy Davis, and they loved her, and they thought of her for Judy Garland, and I was really on board. I had just seen her in a movie where she was all sort of nerve endings,
Yeah.
I just pictured her when I was writing it. I pictured the real Judy Garland, and I pictured Judy Davis.
Yeah, if anyone in here has not seen this movie, I cannot tell you, like Amazon Prime it, whatever, it is unbelievable. Her performance will literally, it's like you're watching Judy Garland do her own life.
She won the Emmy and the Golden Globe and all that stuff.
Oh yeah, and deservedly so, yeah.
I will say, from a writer's point of view, of all the people I've worked with, nobody has stuck to my script. Every letter, every syllable, every ellipses, every semicolon, like Judy Davis.
Wow. Yeah, and you know what? That I could just feel, because when you watch that kind of performance, that's like so transcendent. You can tell that they are pouring every ounce of themselves into it, and they're not only pouring over that script on a daily basis, but they're really paying attention to every little detail, and that's why it was definitive. I for her career, it's really amazing. And you got to work with Victor Garber again. Was that something that was something you wanted to have happen? How involved are you in casting? I know we'll talk about casting for Gentleman's Guide because that's up next, but for film and TV, do you have any involvement in that at all?
It really depends on whether the producers want you to have it. And it's different with every project. Certainly with Gentleman's Guide, I was involved in every detail of casting. But with TV movies, sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Right. So going into Gentleman's Guide, you guys, this show is one of the most genius shows of our time. It is just truly brilliant. We had the honor and privilege to produce the West Coast regional premiere of the show, and had even more of a privilege of having not only one, but two of the original team members on that show, one of whom is in this room right now. Welcome, Peggy Hickey! Woo!
Hi, Peggy.
Peggy, you gotta unmute yourself because I want you to be a part of this conversation. Can you unmute? Oh, here, I unmuted you. There you are. So I saw Peggy come in, and I was like, oh, we gotta involve her in on this as it feels appropriate, because so Gentleman's Guide. Now, this was tell us just briefly where the idea came from, and I want to go on this journey of kind of briefly, but from page to stage, like you get the idea from the original source material, which I want you to talk about. And did you ever hear anything? Because I know that part of the story is that you couldn't get the rights to the title of the book, and so did they ever go like, damn it?
It's not that. This could be a very long story, so I'm going to try to do it the shortest way possible.
Okay.
The book was in the public domain.
Okay.
The film made.
Oh, the film. That's what it was.
Book in 1949 called Kind Hearts and Coronets, and it was considered a classic film in the UK, and film buffs all over the world knew of it. But it was like their Casablanca, if you will,
Right.
And so the first thing we did was we did get the rights, and everything seemed fine until a certain point came, and the rights holders, which was a French corporation called Canal+, what we didn't know at the time was that there was a producer who was very famous and successful, a London producer, who wanted the rights. And so what they did is they stood in the way of every possible attempt on our part, or producers who wanted to produce the show. They just made it impossible for a deal to be made. So finally, we said, okay, we're going to walk away from the movie. We have this novel. It's a great novel. We'd already invented a lot of stuff that wasn't in the movie and it wasn't in the book. And we actually hired a copyright attorney. And we went combed through every word we wrote to make sure we weren't taking anything from the film, even subconsciously. And we just based it on the novel, which was by Roy Horniman, and it was written in 1909. And he was part of Oscar Wilde's circle, very witty and very funny. And it was a critique of British society. It is, and the hypocrisy of the class system. Yeah. And that's what our show is too. So we did all that. And then we announced a production. We had a director, Darko Treznak, and we announced a production at La Jolla Playhouse in San Diego, La Jolla, I should say. And as soon as that got announced, the rights holders, this French company, they slapped a lawsuit on us saying we were in breach of contract. So the production got canceled. We had to deal with our lawyer and their lawyers, and
wow,
it went on for, I guess, about 13 months, and finally the judge dismissed the case.
Wow.
13 months later. And we had to start all over. We had to get a new producer somehow, and luckily our director, Darko Treznak, became the artistic director of Hartford Stage in Connecticut, and he hadn't been when he first got involved. He was at the Old Globe, and he wanted to produce it in his first season at Hartford, and with our fabulous choreography, Peggy Hickey. Peggy and Darko, had worked together for probably 10 years by that time, maybe more.
And luckily, I was not going to be hired in La Jolla. It was a different producer who wanted their choreographer and didn't care that Darko and I had been together 15 years. So I flew to New York and interviewed with her, and she said, "I'm just doing this as a favor for Darko. I don't know you. I'm not hiring you." really flat out. And that was it.
Wow.
I went home and I didn't have it.
Well, then you got to then do the reverse. It started in Hartford, then went to La Jolla. So you got to go.
Well, actually, it went to the Globe.
Yeah, never
Oh, the
went to
Globe. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's
So
right.
it was
Their neighbor, but essentially you still got to stick your tongue out from across
right.
the college.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that worked out.
Darko's Broadway debut. It was Peggy's. It was mine. It was Stephen Luckvack, my collaborator. We were all making
Darko.
debuts. Yeah, Darko. So
It was our whole team. It was, I think, Linda and Alexander's also.
I think Alexander had done something before, but Linda hadn't. Linda Cho.
Yeah, it was. I mean, truly, it was like a whole, like you said, Broadway debut extravaganza. Even with, I think some of the cast as well.
Yeah.
And it was, kind of the dark horse that came out of, nowhere, and just, I mean, of course the Tony's performance, and then of course winning the Tonys and everything, because when you win the Tony, you become the show that the tourists will go see. Of course that always helps give it more longevity. But then the Tony's performance with the brilliant doors, that we've talked to Peggy in a previous panel about, was just is become so iconic and so definite. It's defined that the visual aesthetic of that production. It's pretty. It's just so every second of it is so well crafted. And I usually am like, when we do something at 3D, I love to, like when we did with Ragtime, Robert, when it was like your introduction to us, we did our own version of that show that had not been done before. And I usually like to do that, but there are certain shows that I feel like you just don't mess with. And this has become one of them. You just do it the way that it's been done, because it is not broken in any way, shape, or form. It's just perfect. So how then, because I know Peggy's journey to become, becoming Darko's choreographer for so long, but then how did Darko become your person that you're like, this is the one? How did you know him? How did that happen?
Well, actually, a couple of different people had recommended him. One was Bob Greenblatt, who was one of our producers.
Uh-huh.
And another was an actor who ended up being in the cast, Price Waldman. They had said, there's this guy who I think would get this. And, I went down to the Old Globe and saw his production of The Women by Claire Booth Lewis, which I thought was terrific and very stylish. And we talked, and he just really got it, and he used to say, I'm not called Darko for nothing. He got the dark side of it. He got the comedy, the wickedness of it, the humor, and so I just, it's a leap of faith, but we just trusted him. And it turned out to be one of the smartest.
He was the perfect person for sure. It's not when the stars all align and as your team was from top to bottom. I mean, the costume design, as I've had my hands on those incredible costumes to, just all of it was genius. So it's, then you, real quickly, now you're heavily involved, maybe both you and Peggy can talk about the casting process. You were heavily involved in the casting for this show, correct?
Yeah.
Was only one person that didn't go from Hartford to Broadway?
There were a few.
A few, okay.
For various reasons.
Only 4 of the original 12, I believe,
did not go.
Broadway.
Yeah, was it 4? Yeah. There were various reasons. They're all incredibly talented.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
And they were just, each one there was a different issue.
Sure.
Talent is subjective,
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know talent, but art is subjective, and some people sparked to a performer and some people didn't. And once we had a production going, we were going to Broadway, we had a lot of voices that needed.
More cooks in the kitchen.
A lot of cooks in the kitchen. Our Broadway producers weren't with us until after San Diego.
Yeah, we had no producer until after the Old Globe.
Oh, wow. Okay.
No commercial producer,
Wow.
which was great in a lot of ways because we were able to create the show from the very beginning without the pressure or the input of people who maybe would not have been the best influence necessarily.
Yeah, I remember walking into a final. I didn't come to a lot of the preliminary Broadway auditions. They usually didn't bring me in until it was time to look at the ensemble, because they were the ones who really had to move. And I remember walking into that callback for the Broadway show, and there were all these people at the table talking about the show like they owned it. And I guess now they do.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But how I remember looking at Robert going, what happened? Our little family like exploded.
Yeah. And luckily didn't, sometimes that can be to the detriment of a show. And luckily that wasn't the case for you. It was obviously for certain actors that didn't get to move forward with the project, but luckily it all worked out, obviously, in a great way. But yeah, that had to be wild to be with something from the very beginning, especially Robert. It's your baby, right? And then all of a sudden you have people who are financially invested, who are gonna, bark some louder than others and say what they want or what have you. So that has to be that's a whole nother panel on how to deal with a producer. I don't know anything about that, but yeah.
I have a lot of good things to say about Joey Parnes, our lead producer. So it's not personal to him.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's amazing. That's amazing, because it's not always that way. Now two other things, or three other things, and then you've been so generous with your time and we have to wrap. So what do you remember most about the Tony Awards? Besides the fact that you won.
Oh my God. Well, it was surreal. I mean, you're at Radio City Music Hall, you're in a tuxedo, your wife is in a gorgeous gown, my son was there too, and it was heaven. What can I say?
My friends who have been there and nominated or have won have said it's like, especially like Beth Malone was like, I was like given like a key to the city. Like you're at these events and you're just meeting all these people that I was having lobster sitting next to Sting. And I'm like, wow, it's like you're just meeting all these people that you've wanted to meet all your life.
At the after party.
They want to meet you.
Yeah, the after parties there, there's everybody there. But it's funny, you get 90 seconds from the time they announce your name till you have to finish your script and you've got to get up there.
Wow.
So that was really on my mind. And I, hesitated a little and I didn't do it perfectly, but I pretty much said what I had planned to say, which was very short. And then they escorted me off into the wings. And right there is Clint Eastwood and Samuel L. Jackson, just standing there. They were presenters waiting to go on. And I'm like holding this Tony, and it's like the greatest night of my life, and I'm like floating, and they're there, and they're looking at me like, who is this guy? You know what I mean? It was so weird. But that's not my main takeaway from the night. My main takeaway from the night was being with Jeannie and Max and having that experience together and feeling, I don't know. It was very, very exciting. Obviously, it's much better to win. When Darko, first Linda Cho won for the costume design, and I thought, whoa, wow, great. And then Darko won for Best Director, and it's like, oh my God. And started to think, well, this is going well.
Yeah.
We had 10 nominations altogether. So then there were a lot of categories we didn't win. And then I won, and I was like, and then we won Best Musical, and that was the real nail biter, because our producer, Joey, had said to us from the beginning, with all these nominations, the only thing that matters is Best Musical. If you don't win Best Musical, you don't get the attention, you don't get the audiences, you don't, it's gonna determine the life of the show forever.
Right.
And then, Rosie O'Donnell said the name, and everybody went up there, people I'd never met before. who had given a certain amount of money, got to go up, and they're all crying.
I couldn't make it. I was in the balcony. I saw all those strangers down there on the stage. I never made it.
Peggy, I would have zip-lined my ass down there. Oh my God, that devastates me. I cannot believe that.
Devastating. They had set designers who were not nominated up in the balcony, and I was sitting next to Aaron Ryan, our designer of the videos, and we both stood up and we both started. I started like, let's go, and he went, "We'll never make it."
Yeah, you'll literally be running up as
like, you'll miss the speech. If you go, you're going to be in the lobby. You're never going to make it. So we just kind of went.
My sister, who's listening right now, Carla, she was applauding so hard and screaming so hard that she split her wedding ring in half, and it flew. They later found both halves, but it flew off. You know.
Carla. I did the exact same thing in a show. I was clapping too hard, and I split my wedding ring in half.
That's amazing.
Wow. Who knew? That's great.
Yeah. Okay. And then we have to Oh, go ahead, please.
Just a very quick hi to John Bayless, who went to NYU with me, with whom I wrote my first musical, and my cousin Linda from Australia.
Oh my gosh.
And Lee and all these love, like Clary and Blaine and all these. I'm missing probably somebody, but it's nice to see faces since I don't see anybody.
I know, right? Amen. That has been the blessing of Zoom.
Also, there's a young man who is sitting in front of a Miss Spectacular.
Oh yes, yeah, Colden.
I never put that in my bio, but I am the book writer of that show, which never actually got produced.
Colden is the keeper of he is the one that he's the epitome of the opposite of the people that don't know anything. He knows every little thing about all the things. So see, he's got like it looks like the sheet music or something, or a program. What is that?
There's a CD. There's a CD.
Colden, I unmuted you. What is that?
There's no program because it never got produced.
It's the vocal selections to Mrs. Santa Claus.
Oh
yeah. Well, actually, I worked on Mrs. Santa Claus too, but that's.
I love it. Yes, Colden, you were amazing. You were the future man in chair for sure. Okay, real quick, I wore my Flamingo shirt because you were also working on Flamingo Kid. So real quick, where is that in its process?
Well, I'm writing it with Scott Frankel, who wrote, Grey Gardens and Warpaint, a lot of great shows, and that's a fun collaboration. And Darko Treznak is directing it, and we have the same set designer, projection designer, costume designer as Gentleman's Guide, and we did it at Hartford Stage. It was Darko's last show there, and in his last season, and we had just the best time. It was a terrific production, and we've been working on it ever since, but now with no theaters being open or being booked, they're saying it won't happen until 2021. We're in a kind of a limbo, like everybody. So,
well, you guys follow him, follow the path of Flamingo Kid. Will be the next thing. I've seen parts of it. It is genius as per the usual and to be expected. You guys, huge round of applause for this incredible, and thank you, Peggy, for participating and coming on.
Thank you.
Yeah, love you guys. Love you guys. Love you, Gene.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone. See ya.
Bye.